Well, last, but anything but least, is the National Academy's Public Welfare Medal. It is our most prestigious award and is presented annually to honor extraordinary use of science for the public good. This year's recipient, and I'm not going to keep you in suspense because, of course, it's right on this slide in front of you, is Jane Lubchenco, a marine ecologist world-renowned for her own seminal work on coastal ecology, predator-prey relationships, and anthropogenic impacts on marine ecosystems. Jane and I actually have much in common in addition to our shared love for the ocean. We both graduated from Colorado College, clearly an incubator for ocean scientists. And while Jane, years before that, was growing up in Colorado, and I was growing up in Minnesota, in some odd cosmic intersection, I met her husband when I was a very young child, and he was my neighbor, who my dad hired as our lawn boy to cut the grass. And later, of course, he became Jane's future husband and partner in science. But my dad clearly recognized that Bruce Mengi was far overqualified to cut grass, because by the time I was in 5th grade, Bruce was no longer cutting the grass, and I was, because clearly he was far too talented to spend his time cutting our lawn. Jane became a one-woman force for marine conservation. She effectively engaged all of the rest of us in her crusade to make the case scientifically that marine protected areas made sense. They made sense for fishermen, they made sense for the health of the ocean, and they made sense for the benefit of all mankind. She was effective in convincing scientists, in convincing funding agencies, in convincing nonprofits. All of us became champions for this cause. And she recognized that if good science only remains within the scientific community, it would have little impact. So she started innovative programs to help scientists translate their findings and policy implications to a broader audience. One prominent example is the Leopold Leadership Program to help academic researchers move their knowledge to action and catalyze change to address the world's most pressing sustainability challenges. Another example is COMPASS, the Communication Partnership for Science and the Sea. This program helps scientists build the communication skills, networks, and relationships they need to engage effectively in the public discourse about the environment. She also was one of the founding board members that co-founded Climate Central, a collaboration between leading scientists and journalists researching and reporting the facts about our changing climate and its impact on the public in a nonpartisan manner. Jane also practices what she preaches in terms of leadership and communication. She has served as president of the Ecological Society of America, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and the International Council for Science. Most notably, she served as Undersecretary for Oceans and Atmospheres at the Department of Commerce and as administrator of NOAA as part of President Obama's Dream Team. During her tenure, she made remarkable success in fisheries reform, all using science to drive good decisions. Most recently, she became the State Department's first ever envoy for the oceans. She used the opportunity to expand science-based marine conservation and more effective fisheries management to half a dozen other nations, with which she continues to engage even now that her official assignment has ended. She and Bruce Mengi retain their long-term faculty positions at OSU and are wonderful mentors to many students who wonder whether their dream of a dual career marriage is possible, and they show every day that it is. Jane has already been honored with a MacArthur Genius Award, the Blue Planet Planet Prize, and 19 honorary degrees, among other awards. So what do you give the woman who has everything? Well, the National Academy of Sciences Public Welfare Medal is a start. So Jane, congratulations.
Thank you, my dear.
So happy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcia, for that lovely, lovely introduction. Thank you all for your patience in being here, and congratulations to the spectacular award winners today. Really outstanding science, and I congratulate each of you. My thanks to the nomination and the selection committee for my award. It's just a thrilling honor. And looking at the list of award winners in the past for the Public Welfare Medal, I'm deeply, deeply humbled. This is a very special award. I'm particularly happy today to be able to share this experience with my husband, Bruce Mengi, who deserves this award as much as I do. We have done all of the things that we've done together and collaboratively. So Bruce, thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for being here. It's also a very special pleasure for me to have my son, Duncan, my daughter-in-law, Anna, my grandchildren, Elin and Alistair, here today, my sister, Carolyn, and her daughter, Katie, as well as 4 of Bruce's and my academic daughters, Laura, Liz, Sarah, and Ariana. So thank you guys for all being here. I want to focus the remarks that I have for you today on a subject that Leroy Hood began, sort of focusing on science and society. And in particular, I want to begin by, if I can figure out, here we go. Last year's Public Welfare Medalist, Alan Alda, really focused on his passion for having scientists become better communicators. How many of you were able to hear his remarks? A number of you, excellent. Those of you who haven't, go to the Academy's website and look at his speech. It was very inspiring. And he talks about, among many other things, the curse of knowledge. How very difficult it is, in his experience, for scientists who know a lot about something to be able to talk about it to non-scientists in ways that don't use a lot of jargon, that are interesting and entertaining. And he has deep experience doing that, and I am just so grateful for him for the time and energy that he has devoted to helping us figure out how to be better communicators. In listening to his remarks, I was reminded of the first time that I had the opportunity to meet Senator Al Franken, also a Minnesotan, by the way. We were at a climate conference in Aspen in the late 2000s. I was having breakfast with some colleagues. He knew them. He sat down with them and turned to me and said, "Hi, who are you? I'm Al Franken." I said, "I'm Jane Lubchenco. I'm a marine ecologist." And without missing a beat, he said, "Ooh, marine ecology. Studying the ecology of the marines must be fascinating." Well, I thought, okay. And, you know, it's not clear whether he was just being his comedic self, which he's very quick at doing, or whether he really, people I have discovered don't get marine ecology. They get marine biology, but marine ecology, somehow there's a disconnect because of the word marine, and it, you know, whatever. So that was one of my introductions to some of the challenges of communicating. Even language, even descriptions of what we do are sometimes hard for other people to get. The opportunities that I had when I was at NOAA and as the U.S. Science Envoy gave me lots of insights into not only communicating science, but also engaging with people from a wide spectrum of points of view. And those opportunities have folded into the reflections that I want to share with you today. About a year after being sworn in by Vice President Biden as the administrator of NOAA, we were in the midst of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. The fishermen in the Gulf were really, really concerned, understandably so, about what the impacts of the Gulf spill would be on them and on their lives, on their livelihoods. The president asked the vice president to go to the Gulf and meet with fishermen and talk to them. And the vice president said, I'd be happy to do that, but I don't know a lot about fish or impacts of oil on fish, so I need somebody to come with me who has knowledge about that. So he asked me to come. We hadn't worked together at all yet. He asked me to fly in Air Force Two with him down to the Gulf. And on the plane, I was briefing him about the impacts, what we knew about oil, the impacts of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons on fish, on invertebrates. I didn't use a lot of jargon. I didn't say polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. I used plain English. And I described to him sort of what we knew, what we were doing. And he looked at me and he said, I thought you were a scientist. And I said, I am, not knowing where he was going. And he said, but I just understood everything you told me. And I thought, whoa, you know, here is a very, very distinguished politician, really smart guy, has been briefed thousands of times by scientists, and he thinks that he can't understand us. So that really tells us we have our work cut out for us. I experienced similar challenges, in addition to, hey, I thought you were a scientist, but I just understood you. When I was at NOAA, interacting with members of Congress, communicating to them the importance of funding NOAA's environmental satellites. NOAA is responsible for building and then flying and maintaining and using the information from these environmental satellites as part of the information that we get about the Earth sensing, environmental intelligence. And over 95% of the data that go into the numerical weather models come from satellites, so they're critically important. So I was up on the Hill talking to members of Congress about how important it was for them to fund these satellites because we needed them. The ones that are up there are working fine. We were asking for money for the next generation that we were in the process of building. And this one member of Congress looked at me and said, Doctor, I don't need your satellites. I've got the Weather Channel. So things that might be obvious to us, that the Weather Channel and AccuWeather and all of the other private weather providers get their information from NOAA, from the satellites as well as the other information. Things that are obvious to us. This is the curse of knowledge that Alan Alda was focusing on. And I just give you these examples to flesh it out a little bit above and beyond what he did. So because of these challenges that have been widely recognized by many of us, there have been a number of efforts to help scientists learn to communicate better. Marcia mentioned the Leopold Leadership Program, Compass, and Climate Central. More recently, we have Alan Alda's spectacular program where he does a lot of improv, and AAAS now both under Alan Leshner's leadership as well as in honor of him, have a new program. All of these are really, really important. They don't begin to serve the need that's out there and the number of scientists that would really like to be becoming more adept. I like to call it, and I like to urge scientists to become bilingual. I think we need to learn and teach our students the language of science. That's important for their careers. It's important for them to do their work and communicate with colleagues. But they also need to be able to speak the language of lay people. And those are different. They're not incompatible. And it is hard for a lot of scientists to speak in plain English. It's quite possible, but it takes training. So lose the jargon, figure out the right kinds of metaphors and analogies that actually work and are accurate. Tell stories. Show your human side. Find some common ground with the people that you're interacting with, and establish a reason for them to trust you. Those are all some of the things that both practitioners and social scientists have learned from their work. National Academies has been very active in science communication through both the reports that they've done, most recently 2017, Communicating Science Effectively, but even well before that, the Sackler colloquia that Ralph Cicerone was a real champion for on communicating science. The first two in 2012 and 2013, another one in November of this year. All of those are helping scientists understand this science communication challenge. If you ask school kids how to draw a scientist, this is often what you get. White, male, wild hair, lab coat, glasses. That's the stereotype that many kids have. And in fact, if you ask most Americans to name a living scientist, most of them can't. So this is not just about our teaching ourselves to communicate better. It's about being out there and being known and being seen as being scientists. If kids have these stereotypes, that's a problem. The good news, social scientists tell us, is that these perceptions can be changed. And in fact, one social scientist asked kids to draw a scientist and then took them to meet real scientists at the Fermi Lab and then asked them to draw pictures of real scientists. And that was the result. So these perceptions can change. We just need to have opportunities, not just for kids, but for adults. Another challenge that we have in connecting with society are stereotypes about some of our different disciplines. Molecular scientists are often thought of by members of the public as playing God, which is scary and threatening to some. Environmental scientists are often accused of only telling about the problems, never giving solutions. It's all about doom and gloom. Yet another challenge is when there is a direct conflict between science and people's beliefs about something. Whether it's climate change, evolution, vaccines, there's quite a long list. So we have a number of not just communication challenges, but it's deeper than that. Yet another thing that social scientists tell us is that for an audience to trust someone, to trust what they are saying, they need to see them as both competent and warm. And this shows you the axis of warmth and competence. And you can see a whole bunch of different types of jobs. And here are researchers and scientists, very clearly competent, but cold. And because we are seen as cold, that doesn't lend the feeling of trustworthiness. So figuring out how to overcome this stereotype is a really important element of communication. There's a disconnect in our society between science and the public, and I call it the science society paradox. This was a cartoon in the Boston Globe in 2012, and I would suggest to you that these two poles have been getting farther and farther apart over the last few years, not closer and closer. And it's ironic that just at the time when science has more to offer society and society needs science more than ever before, we have these increasing polarization. So we have our work cut out for us. And much of this, I believe, has contributed to the now post-truth world that we live in. This post-truth world has kind of come up as, hitting a lot of us sort of taking people by surprise. The Oxford English Dictionary selected post-truth as their word of the year for 2016, defining it as relating or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So this post-truth society and a lot of the noise around rejection of science, rejection of evidence, has really been of deep, deep concern to many, many scientists. Scientists are responding in a lot of different fashions. Yesterday's climate march, last week's science march are two of the responses, but we're also seeing scientists much more willing to call up their members of Congress and talk to them, providing much more donations, many more donations to organizations that are actively working on behalf of science. Some members of the scientific community willing to run for office, writing op-eds, letters to the editor, talking to journalists, social media, etc. So there's a lot of activism that's underway. And in fact, I'd be curious, how many of you in the audience have done any one of these things in the last 6 months? Okay, a lot of you. Put your hands down. How many of you were doing that 5 years ago? A few, but fewer. So I think you all have seen sort of what is happening with our community. More and more energy, more and more very, very grave concern for our democracy, but democracy in general around the world. Because the basis of a democracy is an informed citizenry and informed policymakers. And if we have this post-truth craziness going on, that really goes at the heart of a democracy. So not only is it a concern for democracy, it's a concern for the ability of science to help continue to provide the kind of knowledge and solutions and hope and wonder that is so critically important to the future of our world. So far, much of the focus has been on defense and resistance. And the point of my remarks today is that I think those are important, but we need to move beyond that. We need to figure out how to really resolve this science-society paradox and address the post-truth mentality. And I think we can do this. It's not easy, but I believe passionately that we can rise to this occasion. I think we can figure out what the right offense is, not just play defense, and they do go hand in hand. So how can we resolve this paradox? First of all, we need to listen, really listen to the very complex factors that are resulting in this post-truth world. They're very complicated, and it's not just about science. There are a lot of things that are going on. But why has this post-truth world emerged? And we need to understand that. It's not just a matter of defense. If we're going to do offense, we need to understand this issue. We also can't do so, I would assert, from lofty perches that are sitting up above society. We have to be more integrated into society. And in short, I think we must engage, not just communicate, but engage with society more and more effectively. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, I think we need to demonstrate, not just assert, that science is important and that scientists are willing to help. Science, we need to sort of shift the mindset. Science should be seen as trusted. And oftentimes, the narrative that's being spun is that science is wasteful, it's imperious, it's threatening, or it's doom and gloom. We need to move beyond that. We need to shed the entitlement rhetoric. We need to show that science has merits. We need to make it accessible. And part of that is code-generating knowledge with citizens. Now, a lot of people are doing citizen science, engaging citizens with science. How many of you are involved in a citizen science project? So, not too many, but there are a lot of them going on, and they actually can be really, really powerful. We also need to create trust through shared values and shared experiences, and be not just the cold, nerdy scientist stereotype, but also talk about, why you really get excited about science. Talk about what you believe in is important, et cetera. So become more human. Secondly, in addition to that, demonstrate, not just assert, we need to provide hope. We need to identify successes and share successes. It's not all bad stuff. There's an amazing amount of really good stuff that's happening. We need to figure out how to scale those good things up, how to replicate them. We need to focus not just on command and control, make people do something, but on incentives, either economic incentives or social incentives, and create more solutions. And to do so, some of that will mean joining teams, joining partners with NGOs, businessmen, politicians, others that are in positions to help. So Nancy Knowlton organized last week a spectacular conference at the Smithsonian called Earth Optimism Summit, Beyond the Doom and Gloom, with people from around the world to talk about some of the amazing things that are happening in conservation, on land, on the ocean, and it was incredibly inspiring. There is a tremendous amount of stuff underway. There is hope. Again, most of those successes are small scale, and we need to figure out how to replicate them. But it was pretty clear to me from that conference, my takeaway was that hope is rising like a phoenix from the ashes, and we need to figure out how to help her fly. So the grand challenge, pivoting now to make this a little more concrete with the ocean, is how do we use the ocean equitably without using it up? And we talked earlier about agriculture, the importance of agriculture for the future. So too is seafood from the ocean. In fact, 3 billion people depend on seafood for a primary source of their protein. 3 billion people. So that's part of the food security issue. Hope is bubbling up from around the world in terms of addressing some of the fishery challenges, and it's because scientists are engaging. All the things that I listed before, people are doing. I'm going to give you two quick examples, one from fisheries and one from marine reserves. U.S. federal fisheries are a good news story that most Americans have not yet heard. We have turned our fisheries around from very significant overfishing. We've brought them back to sustainability and profitability in a very short period of time. In the year 2000, we had 92 stocks that were overfished in federal waters. By the year 2015, that had been slashed to 38. In the year 2000, we had 0 stocks that had been depleted and then rebuilt to the point that they could be then fished again sustainably. By the year 2015, we had 39. So this is amazing turnaround, amazing progress. Since 2008, the number of fish caught domestically has risen by 23%, value by 32%, and jobs by 35%. So this is very powerful. People don't hear about this. So this is part of the, let's share some of the good things that are happening, and let's look at why they're happening and figure out how we can scale and replicate that. This happened because of engagement between scientists, politicians, NGOs, and fishermen to both push through fishery reforms and then implement them. And I can't give enough credit to the fishermen leaders who were courageous in doing this. And I was delighted to be able to help honor a few of these individuals that I have worked closely with at an event at the White House to celebrate champions of change with these 3 gentlemen. This is not happening just in the US. I could give you lots of examples about what's happening overseas. So again, there are a lot of good news things. And what we're doing is figuring out what the secret sauce is. It's not the same every place. It has to be tailored locally, appropriately. But over and over again, there are some common themes of getting the incentives right. And those incentives might be economic incentives, or they may be social incentives to change behavior. So to figure out how to scale up these successes and replicate them really requires partnerships, engagement, and a focus on incentives. There is hope in doing so. And as some of my colleagues, Steve Gaines and Chris Costello and their team has shown, if we look at the percent of healthy fisheries stocks, here, historic, we've been on a downward trend through time. What does the future look like? We have a very stark choice. If we get fishing sustainable, we could do this, and that's what we've done in the US, is that kind of turnaround. Or we could do business as usual, and that would not be a good scenario for the future of the world. The ways to do that are getting those incentives right and that engagement I was talking about. The benefits calculated through models are pretty impressive. More seafood to be caught because we're ending overfishing, bringing populations back to much, much more abundance than you can fish them and fish them get more fish out, but also leave more fish in the ocean because they are important components of their food webs, and have more profits. So triple bottom line win, pretty good incentive. This has gotten the eye of CEOs of the major seafood companies, and I've been engaged in a dialogue with them. This is still early in the times, but the now 9 largest seafood companies in the world are talking to scientists about how do we become part of the solution, not part of the problem. So this engagement, again, is beginning to pay off. Pivoting to marine reserves, protected areas in the ocean that are fully protected from any extractive or destructive activities. Again, we've synthesized the science through a series of booklets and other efforts, and we've engaged with politicians, with communities, with fishermen around the world. And after decades and decades of very little increase in the global coverage, we've seen a real spike in the last decade from 0.1% to 1.9% of the total ocean strongly protected. And just in the last 2 years, 2015 and 2016, most of that action has been within the exclusive economic zones of a number of countries. And you can see on the slide here the percentage of their EEZs that are strongly protected. The high seas is yet another story. President Obama increased the fraction of the US EEZ that is strongly protected by over 4-fold during the time that he was in office. And speaking of the high seas, 25 governments came together to establish the first really, really large protected area on the high seas in the Ross Sea in the Antarctic. It's the second largest strongly protected area in the world, second after Papahanaumokuakea in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, and it is the largest protected area that has some fully protected and some partly used, but the largest in the world on land or in the ocean. So there is progress. And putting both of those together, fisheries and marine reserves, I would summarize that in the ocean, a wealth of scientific advances plus engagement is triggering change. Scientists have really risen to the challenge of not just studying, but helping devise solutions. We've got a lot more collaborations and a lot more engagement. So that kind of success gives us hope that engagement, not just communication, is possible. So I said earlier that to address this post-truth mentality and engage meaningfully, we needed to demonstrate, not just assert the value of science and provide hope. I've shown you 2 examples with fisheries and marine reserves where that's underway. It's not at the scale that we need, but it actually is hopeful, and we've learned lessons about what works and what doesn't work. In addition to that, though, there's a third key element here to address this post-truth thing, and that is our academic structures and academic training. They are not currently aligned with these challenges. Our reward structures reward what we used to value, not what we need to value. And specifically, I believe that we need to modify the scientific reward structures and training where academics are rewarded, not punished or not just tolerated for engaging. It takes time. It takes energy. If you engage, you publish less. You get fewer grants, or you get a different kind of grant. I think engagement should be a core responsibility of academic scientists. Now, I'm quick to say that just as not all scientists are going to excel at teaching, not all scientists are going to excel at engagement. So I'm not expecting everybody to engage, but everybody should support those who do. And I'm suggesting that in addition to having P&T committees focus on research, publications, grants, teaching, sometimes service, sometimes outreach, but that we make engagement a very clear expectation and put it in our job descriptions and fold it into our evaluations of faculty. So too do we need to let students be encouraged and emboldened and unleashed to do those things. We need to support them and train them, and we need to recognize that it takes resources to do those effectively. So I think it's time for us to take back the narrative. We need to write a new chapter in the relationship between science and society, one that is based on service with humility, with transparency, with honesty and genuine respect. And it's time for a quantum leap in relevance of science to society. Now, Ralph understood these. Ralph would encourage us to engage with humility, transparency, honesty, and respect. And in honor of him, I highlight those attributes because he lived them and he believed them. I believe very much that science, in the end, is about hope. And to achieve that promise, we need to move beyond just learning how to communicate better and move toward more fully engaging effectively with society. We need to, because we owe it not only to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren and the rest of the planet. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we've come to the end of our program. I hope you've all been encouraged as much as I have by the dedication of scientists who devoted so much of their career, decades in some cases, to see experiments through to the end on little more than a wing and a prayer, and that you were uplifted by the stories of researchers who risked their own lives to develop treatments for diseases that threatened thousands, if not millions, that you were convinced that science is still the endless frontier. Please, if today's award winners could stand up one more time so that we could give them a final round of applause.